Ethan needs to move to give the seat to one of the airline's regular VIP passengers.
This is my seat. I'm not moving.
Sir, you need to get up. Now. The words cut through first class like a blade. Conversations died mid-sentence. Ice quinked in untouched glasses. Somewhere near the window, a phone lifted, slow and quiet, already recording. Ethan Brooks didn't move. Seat 2A, window side. Leather creaked softly under his weight as he leaned back, one hand resting on the armrest, the other holding a tablet filled with notes. His breathing stayed even, controlled, like this moment didn't belong to him. Lauren Hayes stood over him, posture rigid, smile gone. Mid-30s, hair pulled tight, uniform pressed sharp enough to cut. Her badge caught the cabin light as she crossed her arms. "I said," she repeated, louder now, "you need to move. We have a priority passenger who requires this seat." Behind her, Victoria Cole shifted her weight in the aisle, designer heels clicking once against the floor. Late 40s, perfect makeup, expensive impatience. Her eyes scanned Ethan the way people look at something out of place. "I always sit there," she said, just loud enough. "It's practically my seat." A few passengers exchanged glances. No one spoke. Not yet. Ethan finally looked up. Calm, measured, unbothered. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." A pause, not long, but long enough to make people uncomfortable. Lauren let out a short breath through her nose, not quite a laugh, something sharper. "Sir, I've been doing this for over 10 years, she said, her voice tightening. "I know who belongs in first class." There it was. Not shouted, not explicit, but heavy, clear. Ethan's fingers tapped once against the edge of his tablet, a small movement, the only sign he'd heard exactly what she meant. Without breaking eye contact, he reached slowly into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet, smooth, deliberate. He held up a sleek black card between two fingers. "Platinum member," he said quietly, "just like everyone else up here." Lauren glanced at it. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. Surprise. Then it vanished. "I understand," she replied, her tone shifting back to polished politeness, "but this particular seat is usually reserved for our more frequent guests." Her eyes drifted just briefly toward Victoria. The message landed without needing words. Around them the cabin tightened, shoulders stiffened. A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper halfway. A woman near the front leaned back, pretending not to stare. Ethan nodded once, slow. "And today," he said, "it's reserved for me." Victoria stepped forward now, her smile thin, controlled. "This is ridiculous," she said, looking past Ethan, not at him. "I have a connection to make. I don't have time for this." Her fingers tapped the face of her watch, sharp, impatient, entitled. She shifted again, her patience slipping. "Sir," she said, softer now, but more dangerous, "we can move you to another seat. Plenty of room in business class. You'll still be comfortable." Not first class. Not equal. A downgrade dressed up as a favor. Ethan's gaze didn't waver, not at Lauren, not at Victoria, not at the eyes now quietly watching from every direction. "No," he said. One word, flat, final. The air changed. Lauren's jaw tightened, Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. Somewhere behind them, a phone camera adjusted focus. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lauren straightened, her voice losing its softness entirely. "Fine," she said. "If you're going to make this difficult, we'll handle it another way." She turned sharply, heels striking the floor with controlled force as she walked toward the front of the cabin. Victoria didn't follow right away. She lingered, just long enough to lean slightly closer, her voice low, edged with quiet contempt. "People should know their place," she murmured. Then she stepped back, smoothing her blazer, already acting like the seat was hers. Ethan didn't respond, but his eyes followed Lauren as she reached for the service phone, and for the first time, something shifted behind his calm. Not anger, not fear, recognition, like he'd been here before, like he already knew exactly how this would end. And somewhere in the cabin, the quiet recording continued, capturing every second of a mistake that was about to cost far more than a seat. Lauren's voice carried low into the service phone, but her body gave everything away. Tight shoulders, sharp gestures, a glance back at seat 2A that lingered half a second too long. Ethan had already gone back to his tablet. Scroll, pause, scroll again. Lines of a keynote presentation moved under his fingertips. Ethics, bias, systems. The words sat there, clean and clinical. Outside, the wing caught the afternoon light, bright and indifferent. Inside, the temperature dropped. Across the aisle, a man in a navy blazer leaned toward his wife. "This doesn't feel right," he whispered. She nodded, eyes fixed forward, pretending not to hear anything at all. Victoria Cole didn't pretend. She stood in the aisle like she owned it, one hand gripping the handle of her designer bag, the other tapping against her watch again. Each tap louder now, more deliberate. "I fly this route every month," she said. "Not to Ethan, not really. To the cabin, to the air. I've never had to deal with this." No one answered. A flight attendant near the galley hesitated, watching Lauren, then quickly looked away. Ethan adjusted slightly in his seat, crossed one leg over the other, calm, composed, his reflection faint in the window, a man who looked like he belonged anywhere he chose to be. Lauren returned, faster this time, no smile, no pretense. With her was Brandon Keller, mid-40s, broad shoulders, authority worn like armor. His eyes swept the cabin once, quick and assessing, before locking onto Ethan. There was no greeting. "Sir," Brandon said, his voice firm, carrying just enough to reach the surrounding rows, "we need you to move to accommodate one of our valued passengers." Ethan didn't look up immediately. He finished reading the line in front of him, let the silence stretch. Then he lifted his eyes. "I've already explained," he said evenly. "This is my assigned seat." Brandon stepped closer, too close, invading space without touching. "Then let me clarify," he replied. "Some customers have established preferences. We honor those preferences." A pause. "And we expect cooperation." The word hung there, heavy. Across the cabin, someone shifted. A seatbelt clicked. The sound felt louder than it should. Ethan tilted his head slightly, studying him now. "And my preference," he said, "is to sit in the seat I paid for." A flicker crossed Brandon's face. Not confusion, irritation. Victoria exhaled sharply behind him. "This is unbelievable," she snapped. "You're holding up the entire cabin." Ethan didn't turn. Brandon leaned in just a fraction more, lowering his voice. Not enough. "We can do this the easy way," he said, "or we can make this complicated." There it was. Not a request. A line drawn. Ethan's gaze didn't move. "Then I guess we're done talking about the easy way." Silence slammed down. For a second, Brandon didn't react, like his brain needed time to catch up to what he'd just heard. Then his jaw tightened. Behind him, Victoria's lips curled into something close to a smile. Phones were no longer hidden now. 1, 2, 3. Small black rectangles angled just enough to capture everything. Lauren noticed, looked uneasy for the first time. Brandon straightened, adjusting his tie with a sharp tug. "All right," he said, louder now. "If you refuse to comply, we'll have no choice but to escalate this." Ethan held his gaze. "Do what you need to do." No hesitation, no emotion, just certainty. And that was the moment the room shifted again. Because this wasn't defiance born from arrogance, it was something colder, something steadier. Like a man who wasn't guessing, like a man who already knew exactly how far this would go and wasn't afraid to let it happen. Brandon turned on his heel. Lauren followed, slower this time, glancing back once, then again. Victoria stepped forward immediately, sliding her bag into the overhead above 2A as if the outcome was already decided. She didn't look at Ethan, didn't need to. "Finally," she muttered under her breath. Ethan didn't move, didn't react. But as Brandon reached the front and grabbed the intercom phone, something subtle shifted in Ethan's posture. His fingers rested lightly on his tablet, then stilled, waiting. Because somewhere deep beneath the surface of this quiet cabin, the consequences had already begun. 5 minutes passed. long enough for tension to settle into the walls, long enough for silence to feel heavy. No engines yet, no movement, just people waiting, watching, pretending not to. Ethan didn't touch his tablet. His gaze drifted to the window, unfocused. The reflection staring back wasn't just a man in pressed jacket sitting in first class. It was a lifetime compressed into a single moment. A small apartment in South Chicago, a flickering screen, fingers too young to understand limits, teaching themselves code line by line, nights without sleep, days without recognition. A voice from years ago echoed, low and steady. They'll decide who you are before you open your mouth. Ethan blinked once, back to the present. Footsteps approached, measured, heavier. Captain Daniel Mercer, late 50s, gray at the temples, the kind of face people trusted without question, authority without effort. He moved down the aisle with Brandon just half a step behind him, Lauren trailing, her expression tighter now, less certain. The cabin shifted again. This wasn't routine anymore. Mercer stopped beside Ethan's seat, looked down, not rushed, not aggressive, controlled. "Sir," he began, voice calm but edged with finality, "I understand there's an issue." Ethan met his eyes. "No issue," he said, "just a seat assignment." A pause. Mercer nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. "My crew informs me you're refusing to relocate." "I'm declining to give up the seat I paid for." Words precise, clean. Mercer exhaled softly through his nose, the patience of a man used to being obeyed. "You have to understand," he said, "we sometimes make adjustments for the overall comfort of our passengers." Ethan didn't look away. "And I'm one of those passengers." The air tightened. Behind Mercer, Brandon shifted his weight, already losing patience. Lauren avoided eye contact entirely. Victoria stood a few feet back now, arms crossed, watching like this was a performance staged for her benefit. Mercer's tone cooled just slightly. "This is your final request," he said. "We need you to move." Ethan's fingers tapped once on the armrest. "Or," one word. Mercer held his gaze. "Or we'll have to remove you from the aircraft." There it was. Clear, direct, no more layers. A murmur rippled through the cabin, quiet, shocked. Ethan's expression didn't change. "You're removing me," he said slowly, "because I won't give up my assigned seat to another passenger who prefers it?" No one answered immediately, because there wasn't an answer that sounded right. Brandon stepped in, filling the silence. "You're being removed for non-compliance," he said quickly. Ethan nodded once, like he was filing that away. Understood. His hand moved, slow, deliberate, into his jacket. Lauren tensed. Brandon stiffened. Ethan pulled out his phone. Not fast, not defensive, calm. He tapped the screen, lifted it slightly. Recording. "I want to be clear," he said, voice even, carrying just enough. "I'm being asked to leave this flight for refusing to give up a seat I paid for. Is that correct?" Mercer's jaw tightened. "Sir, recording crew interactions is not permitted." Ethan didn't lower the phone. "It's not illegal," he replied, "and I'm not interfering with anything." Brandon took a step forward, hand twitching like he might reach for the device. "Turn that off." Ethan leaned back slightly, just enough to create distance. "No." The word landed harder this time, not loud, but final. Around them, phones were fully visible now, no one hiding anymore. Multiple angles, multiple witnesses. Victoria shifted uncomfortably for the first time. This wasn't quiet anymore. Mercer straightened. Something in his posture changed. Decision made. He turned slightly toward Brandon. "Call security." 2 words. Simple. Irreversible. Lauren's breath caught, just for a second. Brandon nodded immediately, already reaching for his radio. Ethan lowered the phone just enough to rest it against his leg, still recording. His face remained calm, but his eyes sharpened. Not panic, not anger, Recognition. Like the final piece had just fallen into place. Like everything unfolding now wasn't surprising at all. Because somewhere beyond this cabin, beyond this moment, beyond the assumptions tightening around him, there were consequences none of them could see yet. And they were already moving. The sound came first. Heavy boots on metal. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. The cabin went still. Even the air felt different now, thicker, tighter, like everyone was holding the same breath and didn't know when they'd be allowed to release it. Ethan didn't move. His phone rested against his leg, camera still running, a quiet red light capturing everything, every word, every face, every decision being made in real time. 2 security officers stepped into the aisle. Dark uniforms, neutral expressions, hands resting near their belts. Not aggressive, not relaxed either, trained to expect resistance. They stopped at row 2. "Sir," the first officer said, voice controlled, "we've been informed there's a situation." Ethan looked up. "There is," he replied. "I'd like to understand what rule I've broken." The officer hesitated, just a fraction. Behind them, Brandon crossed his arms. Lauren stood rigid, eyes fixed somewhere above Ethan's shoulder. Captain Mercer remained silent, watching, letting the process unfold. "You've been asked to leave the aircraft," the second officer said. "We need you to come with us." Ethan nodded once. "On what grounds?" No immediate answer, because there wasn't one that fit. Brandon stepped forward again, filling the gap. "He's refusing to comply with crew instructions," he said quickly. "That's enough." Ethan's eyes shifted to him. "Refusing to give up a seat I paid for," he corrected. A pause. The officer glanced between them. Something in his posture softened. Not agreement, not yet, but doubt. Behind Ethan, a woman's voice broke the silence. "He hasn't done anything wrong." Soft, but clear. Heads turned. An older woman in row 3, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes steady. She didn't look away. Another voice followed, younger, sharper. "This is being recorded." Phones lifted higher now, no hiding, no pretending. Victoria shifted where she stood, her composure cracking at the edges. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I have places to be." No one answered her. The first officer turned back to Ethan. "Sir," he said, quieter now, "we need you to step off the plane so we can resolve this." Ethan held his gaze. "Am I being detained?" The question landed clean. The officer hesitated again, longer this time. "No," he said, "we just need you to come with us." Ethan studied him for a second, then nodded. Understood. He reached down, closed his tablet, slid it into his bag, each movement slow, controlled, no sudden motions, no resistance. Dignity, even now. As he stood, the leather seat released a soft sigh beneath him. Victoria stepped forward immediately, like she'd been waiting for that exact moment. Her bag was already in place. Her eyes flicked to the seat, then away, claiming it without saying a word. Ethan didn't look at her. Didn't need to. He stepped into the aisle. Straight posture, shoulders back, head level. No shame. But the walk told a different story. Eyes followed him, some lowered in discomfort, others locked on him with quiet support. A few with something else, recognition. Because everyone knew what this was and what it wasn't. As he passed Brandon, something shifted again. A hand moved, quick, subtle. Victoria. A folded bill slipped into Brandon's pocket like it had done this before, practiced, easy. "Thank you for handling that," she murmured, low, but not low enough. 3 phones caught it. Brandon's face didn't change, but his eyes flickered. For the first time, uncertainty. Ethan kept walking, didn't turn, didn't react, but his fingers tightened slightly around the strap of his bag. He saw it, he heard it, he recorded it. At the door, the light shifted, brighter, harsher, the outside world waiting just beyond the frame of this controlled, curated space. He stepped off the plane, and the moment his foot hit the ground, something changed. Not in him, in everything else. because back inside that cabin, they believed this was over, a difficult passenger removed, a problem solved. But out here was where the real story was about to begin. The door sealed behind him with a hollow thud. Inside, the cabin exhaled. Outside, the air hit colder, sharper, real. Ethan stepped onto the jet bridge without breaking stride. The security officers followed half a step behind, not touching him, not guiding him, just there, watching, unsure now. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The hum felt louder than it should. "Sir?" the first officer said, quieter this time. "We just need to clear this up inside." Ethan stopped, turned. Not abrupt, not defensive, controlled. "I'd like to understand something first," he said. The officers exchanged a glance. Ethan's voice didn't rise. "What policy did I violate?" Silence. A beat too long. The second officer shifted his weight, looked down briefly at the tablet in his hand, scrolling through a report that wasn't helping him. "It says here you were being disruptive," he replied, but even he didn't sound convinced. Ethan held his gaze. "I was sitting," he said, quietly, "in my assigned seat." Another pause. Because that was true, and everyone knew it. The first officer exhaled slowly. "There may have been a misunderstanding," he admitted. Not an apology, not yet, but closer. Ethan nodded once, like he expected nothing more. "There was," he said, "just not on my end." The words landed without aggression, but they stayed. The officers didn't respond, because they didn't have one. Ethan stepped past them, moving toward the gate area, calm, measured, like this was already behind him. But it wasn't, not even close. His phone was in his hand again, unlocked. His thumb moved quickly across the screen. A message, short, direct, to Elise Carter, Chief Operating Officer. "Removed from flight, need legal team now. Send." No hesitation. Another message followed. "Possible discrimination, evidence secured. Send." He didn't look back, didn't need to, because everything that mattered was already documented. Behind him, the officers lingered. The second one shook his head slightly. "This doesn't feel right," he muttered. The first didn't answer, because he knew. Minutes passed, then footsteps, quick, light. "Excuse me, sir?" Ethan turned. A woman stood there, slightly out of breath, early 30s, smart casual, eyes sharp, focused. Megan Foster. She held her phone in one hand like it weighed more than it should. "I was on your flight," she said, row 3, across the aisle. Ethan nodded once. "I saw." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "I recorded everything," she said. Her voice tightened slightly. "From the moment she asked you to move to when they took you off." She turned the screen toward him. Video. Clear, steady. Lauren leaning in, Brandon stepping closer. The words, the tone. Then Victoria. The money. Twice. Unmistakable. Ethan watched for a second. Not the whole thing. Just enough. He looked up. "May I?" he asked. She nodded immediately. "I'll send it," she said. "Full file. No edits." Her jaw tightened. That wasn't right. Not emotional, not dramatic, just fact. Ethan's expression shifted, slightly softer. "Thank you," he said, and he meant it. They exchanged contact information quickly, efficient, clean, no wasted words, because both of them understood what this was now. Not an incident, evidence. Megan stepped back. "You're going to do something about this, right?" A question, but not really. Ethan looked at her. For the first time, something flickered behind the calm. Not anger, not even frustration. Clarity. "Yes," he said. One word, certain, final. His phone buzzed. Response. "Elise, I'm on my way." Another buzz. Legal team looped in. Another. Communications already tracking social media. Ethan glanced at the screen, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. Slow breath in, slow breath out. Around him, the airport moved like nothing had happened. Announcements overhead, wheels rolling across tile, people rushing to gates. Normal. But somewhere else, something had already started. Inside that plane, they thought they had removed a problem. Outside, they had just created one.
and it was about to get a lot bigger than a seat.
By the time Ethan reached the lounge, the first clip was already out. A low murmur rippled through the room as screens lit up, one after another. A businessman near the bar paused mid-sip, eyes narrowing at his phone. A couple by the window leaned closer together, replaying the same 10 seconds again and again. Lauren's voice, Brandon's threat, the words no one could unhear. Ethan didn't sit. He stood near the glass, runway stretching out beyond him, planes moving in slow, distant silence. His reflection stared back, steady, unchanged. His phone buzzed. Elise. "Video's trending," she said, no greeting. "Already over 2 million views." Ethan closed his eyes for half a second. "Which angle?" "All of them," she replied. "Multiple uploads. One shows the cache." A pause. "That's the one spreading fastest." Ethan opened his eyes again. Out on the runway, a jet lifted into the sky, clean and effortless. Inside, everything was about to get heavy. "Legal's assembling," Elise continued. "We're pulling passenger statements. Press is calling." Ethan nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Good." Another buzz. "Communications. Major outlets picking it up." Another. #Silverjet discrimination, trending. The name sat there on his screen. Silverjet. For a moment, the world narrowed, then widened, because this wasn't just about a flight anymore. It was about a system, a pattern, a truth too many people already recognized. Across the lounge, a television flickered to life, muted, but the caption told the story. "Passenger removed from first class amid discrimination allegations." Footage rolled beneath it, grainy, shaky, real. Ethan standing, calm, surrounded, taken out. He watched for a second, then turned away. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He answered. "Mr. Brooks?" Male voice, tight, controlled. "Yes. This is Richard Coleman, CEO of Silverjet Airlines." There it was, sooner than expected. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Let the silence stretch. "I've just been made aware of the situation," Coleman continued, "and I want to personally apologize for what happened." Apologize. The word felt thin. Ethan's gaze drifted back to the runway. "What exactly are you apologizing for?" he asked. A pause. Longer this time. "For the handling of the situation," Coleman said carefully. Ethan's jaw tightened, just slightly. "The handling," he repeated. "Yes, You removed a passenger from his assigned seat," Ethan cut in, voice still calm, "after accepting money from another passenger to do it." Silence. On the other end, something shifted. Paper, movement, a breath caught too quickly. "That is still being reviewed," Coleman said carefully. Ethan let that sit, then spoke. "My legal team will be in touch." Short, clean, final. "Mr. Brooks, I assure you we take this very seriously." Ethan ended the call. No anger, no raised voice, just decision. His phone buzzed again. Elise. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Try me." "They just identified you." Ethan stilled. "How?" "Passenger manifest, social media cross-check. It's out." A beat. "They know who you are." Across the lounge, the television changed. New headline. Tech CEO Ethan Brooks involved in viral airline incident. A photo appeared. Not from today. A conference stage, Brightcore logo behind him, suit, microphone, authority. The room reacted instantly. Heads turned, whispers spread. Recognition moved through the space like a current. Ethan didn't move, didn't acknowledge it, but something had shifted, completely. Because inside that plane, he was just another passenger. Out here, he was something else. And somewhere, in a glass office high above the city, a man named Richard Coleman was realizing exactly what his company had just done. Not to a customer, to the one person they couldn't afford to get wrong. And the cost had only just begun. The boardroom went silent before the video even ended. Richard Coleman didn't sit. He stood at the head of the long glass table, one hand pressed flat against the surface, the other gripping a remote that had already stopped responding to him. On the wall, the footage froze mid-frame. Ethan Brooks, standing, calm, surrounded. Then the cut, Victoria's hand, the cache, clear, undeniable. Around the table, executives avoided eye contact. A CFO stared down at his notes like numbers could fix this. The head of operations rubbed his temples. Someone at the far end whispered, "Oh my God," under their breath and didn't realize they'd said it out loud. Richard exhaled slowly. How far has it spread? The PR director didn't look up from her screen. Over 5 million views, she said. Climbing fast, major networks picked it up. We're trending nationally. Another pause. And the narrative? Richard asked. She swallowed. Not in our favor. On the wall, a second clip replaced the first. Different angle, same truth. Brandon's voice this time, clearer, sharper. We can do this the easy way, or we can make it complicated. A murmur moved through the room, then silence again. Richard closed his eyes for a second. Who is he? He asked. No one answered immediately, because they already knew. The PR director turned her screen toward him. Ethan Brooks, she said, founder and CEO of Bright Core Systems. The words landed like impact. Richard didn't move, but something in his face shifted. Confirm that? He said. It's confirmed. A beat. He's also, I know who he is, Richard cut in. His voice dropped, controlled, tight. He's the one we've been negotiating with. No one spoke, because now they understood, not just the mistake, the scale of it. The CFO leaned forward suddenly, flipping through a folder with shaking hands. Sir, there's more. Richard didn't look at him. Say it. He's been acquiring shares, the CFO said, quietly. Over the past 2 years. The room tightened. How much? Someone asked. The answer came slower than it should have. Just over 25%. Silence. Not the kind that fades, the kind that locks in place. Richard finally sat, slowly, as if the weight had just caught up to him. That gives him, someone started. Control, the CFO finished. No one argued, because there was nothing to argue. On the screen, the video looped again. Ethan, calm, removed. The same moment, over and over. Richard leaned back in his chair, staring at it. He hasn't called back, the PR director said quietly. He will, Richard replied, but his voice didn't carry certainty. It carried something else, understanding. Because this wasn't a customer complaint. This wasn't a refund. This was power, and they had just humiliated it. A phone rang, sharp, loud, breaking the silence. All eyes turned. Richard looked down at the screen. Unknown number. He didn't hesitate this time. He answered. Yes. No introduction, no greeting. On the other end, a voice. Calm, measured. I want an emergency board meeting, Ethan said, immediately. No anger, no raised tone, just command. Richard straightened. That can be arranged, he replied quickly. It will be, Ethan said. A pause. Then quieter. What happened today isn't a mistake, it's culture. The words settled into the room, heavy, unavoidable. And culture, Ethan said, has consequences. Richard's grip tightened on the phone. We're prepared to take action. You're out of time for preparation, Ethan cut in. Silence, on both ends. Then one final sentence. I'll see you in an hour. The line went dead. Richard lowered the phone slowly. No one spoke, because no one needed to. The shift had already happened. Not in the market, not in the media, in the room. Because the man they removed from a seat was now walking in to take control of everything. The room was already full when Ethan walked in. Conversations stopped mid-word. Chairs shifted. Someone stood too quickly and knocked a pen to the floor. No one picked it up. Glass walls, city below, a long table polished to a mirror, and at the far end, Richard Coleman waiting, shoulders squared, eyes fixed on the door. Ethan didn't rush. Same suit, same calm. The one he wore when they took him off the plane. No tie adjustment, no attempt to soften the moment. He crossed the room with measured steps and took a seat without asking. Across from him, the executives held their breath. Richard cleared his throat. "Mr. Brooks," he began, voice controlled, "we want to express our deepest apologies for—" "I'm not here for apologies," Ethan said. No volume, no heat, just final. The sentence cut clean through the room. Richard nodded once, too quickly. "Understood. Then let's discuss accountability," Ethan said. A single word. He placed his phone on the table, screen down, like evidence that didn't need to be shown to be believed. 3 employees, Ethan said. Lauren Hayes, Brandon Keller, Daniel Mercer. No hesitation on the names. They're terminated, effective immediately. A ripple moved through the room. Someone shifted in their seat. The head of HR glanced at Richard, waiting. Richard leaned forward slightly. "We can consider suspension pending investigation." "No," Ethan said, still calm, but now colder. "This isn't a negotiation." Silence dropped again, because everyone felt it. The line had been drawn. Richard's jaw tightened. "There are union considerations, due process. You accepted cash from a passenger to remove another passenger from his seat," Ethan said. "That's not a gray area. That's misconduct." No one argued, because they had seen it, frame by frame. Richard exhaled slowly. "We'll take appropriate action," he said carefully. Ethan watched him, then shook his head once. "Immediate," he said. A beat. And public. That word landed harder than the rest. Public. Because this wasn't just internal anymore. This was reputation, market, trust. The CFO shifted, finally speaking. "If we move too fast, we risk—" "You already did," Ethan cut in. No anger, just truth. The CFO stopped. Ethan leaned back slightly, eyes moving across the table, taking them all in, one by one. "This isn't about me," he said. Another pause, because that was the twist. "I'll be fine," he continued. "I have resources, visibility, power." He let the words sit. "Most people you treat like this don't." The room tightened, because now it wasn't just a mistake, it was a pattern, a mirror. Ethan's gaze returned to Richard. "The contract," he said. Richard stiffened. "We can still move forward," he said quickly. "We'll accelerate reforms, bring your team in. It's canceled." Flat. Immediate. The air left the room. Richard blinked, once, then again. "That contract was critical to our—" "I know exactly what it was," Ethan said. Quiet, precise, and what it was worth. A pause. Then the shift. "If I walk away," Ethan continued, "I don't just take the contract." The CFO leaned forward, already knowing. "You take the shares," he said. Ethan didn't look at him, but he nodded once. "Dumped on the market," the CFO added under his breath. Silence. Heavy. Calculating. Richard leaned back slowly, because now he saw it clearly. This wasn't damage control. This was survival. Ethan folded his hands on the table. "I'm not asking you to fix optics," he said. "I'm telling you to fix the system." Another pause. "And you have one chance." No one moved. No one spoke. Because in that moment, every person in that room understood something they hadn't before. The man they had dismissed was now deciding whether their company lived or collapsed. And he wasn't raising his voice. He didn't need to. Because power didn't sound loud. The termination letters were printed before the meeting ended. No delays, no internal memos passed around for approval, no quiet transfers, no soft exits. Just signatures. Ink pressed into paper with the kind of finality that doesn't leave room for interpretation. 3 names. Lauren Hayes, Brandon Keller, Daniel Mercer. Security was already waiting downstairs. Lauren sat in a small conference room on the third floor, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Her eyes were fixed on the table, but she wasn't seeing it. She was replaying the moment, the words, the tone, the way Ethan had looked at her without raising his voice. "I know who belongs in first class." The sentence echoed back now, sharper, colder. The door opened. HR stepped in. Neutral face, folder in hand. "Lauren," she said softly, "your employment with Silverjet is terminated effective immediately. No build-up, no cushioning, just fact." Lauren's lips parted. Nothing came out at first. I was following instructions," she managed. HR didn't sit. "The video shows otherwise." Lauren's breath caught, because she knew which part. Not the words, the money. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the folder. Inside, the still image was printed in color. Victoria's hand, the folded bill, her pocket. Undeniable. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "I didn't think it would go this far," she whispered. HR didn't respond, because it already had. Down the hall, Brandon wasn't sitting. He was pacing, back and forth, fast, controlled anger cracking at the edges. "This is ridiculous," he snapped as soon as the door opened. "You can't fire me over one passenger complaint." The legal counsel stepped in behind HR this time. "It's not one complaint," he said. He placed a tablet on the table, pressed play. Brandon's own voice filled the room. "We can do this the easy way, or we can make it complicated." He froze. The room felt smaller. "That's out of context," he said quickly. The video continued. The cash. Clear. Close. His hand. His pocket. Silence. Brandon's jaw tightened. "This is how it works," he muttered. "High-value customers get priority." The legal counsel didn't blink. Not at the cost of violating policy. Brandon looked away, because he knew. He just never thought it would matter. At the far end of the building, Captain Daniel Mercer stood alone in a briefing room. 30 years in the air, thousands of flights, decisions made under pressure. And this was the one that would follow him. HR didn't speak immediately when they entered. They didn't need to. Mercer turned slowly. "I trusted my crew," he said. His voice was steady, but quieter than before. "You overrode policy," HR replied. A pause. Mercer nodded once, because that was true. The folder was placed in front of him. Termination. Immediate. No appeal. He didn't reach for it right away. Instead, he looked at his own badge on his uniform, ran his thumb across it, then unclipped it, set it down. Slow, deliberate, like closing a chapter that had defined him. Outside, the story kept growing. Screens lit up across the country, clips replayed, debated, shared. Not just the removal, the pattern, the tone, the assumption. Victoria Cole sat in her living room, television flickering before her. Her name scrolled across the bottom of the screen, her face captured mid-sentence. People should know their place. She reached for the remote, muted it, but the silence didn't help. Her phone buzzed, then again, and again. Messages, notifications. Her company had already sent the email. Administrative leave, pending review. Friends stopped replying. Invitations disappeared. For the first time, the room felt too quiet. Back at headquarters, Richard stood alone in the boardroom. The chairs were empty now. The screen was dark, but the reflection remained. He looked at his own face in the glass. Tired, older, different. Because the cost wasn't just financial anymore. It was structural, cultural. And somewhere in the city, Ethan Brooks walked out of the building without looking back. No victory, no satisfaction, just movement. Forward. Because this was never about one flight. It was about what that flight revealed. And now that it had been seen, there was no putting it back. 48 hours later, every Silverjet aircraft stayed on the ground. Gates stood open but empty. Departure boards flickered with the same word over and over: delayed. Inside hangars and conference rooms across the country, employees sat in rows instead of aisles. No uniforms in motion, no service carts, no rehearsed smiles. Just faces, real ones. On the main screen, a single sentence appeared: "Bias is not always loud." Ethan stood at the front. No stage lights, no applause, just a room full of people who now understood that something had shifted beneath them. "This isn't about punishment," he said. His voice carried without effort. "It's about recognition." A pause. Because what happened wasn't one decision, it was a pattern that felt normal. Eyes lowered, shoulders tightened. Some nodded without realizing it. Ethan stepped aside. The simulation began. A scenario replayed on screen. A passenger, quiet, seated, questioned anyway. The same tone, the same assumptions, the same outcome. But now the room saw it, not as routine, as wrong. Across locations, the same training unfolded. Not slides, not checklists. Real moments, real consequences. Conversations that didn't let people hide behind policy. Lauren sat in the back row of one session. No uniform now, no badge, just a notebook she wasn't writing in. She watched the video of herself, heard her own voice, saw the moment the line was crossed. Her jaw tightened, not in defense, in realization. Beside her, another former employee stared straight ahead. "I didn't think it was bias," he said quietly. Lauren didn't respond, because now she knew. It didn't matter what she thought, it mattered what she did. In another room, Brandon sat alone, arms crossed at first, defensive, closed. But the footage didn't stop. Angle after angle, his words, his posture, his certainty. It wore him down. Not in one moment, in layers, until he leaned forward, elbows on knees, head lowered. For the first time, quiet. Captain Mercer stood in front of a smaller group, not teaching, listening. "I trusted structure over judgment," he said. His voice wasn't authoritative anymore. It was honest. "And I stopped seeing the person in front of me." The room stayed still, because that landed deeper than any policy. Weeks passed, then months. Flights resumed, but something had changed. Passengers noticed it first. The tone, the attention, the absence of invisible lines. "I had an issue with my seat," one man said at a gate. "They fixed it without making me feel like I didn't belong." Another nodded. "It feels different now," because it was. Back at headquarters, the numbers began to recover. Slowly, then steadily. Trust rebuilding the way it always does. Not with statements, with behavior. Ethan stood once more by the window in his office. City below. Movement constant. Elise stepped in quietly. "6-month report," she said. He took it, flipped through the pages. Customer satisfaction up. Employee retention stabilizing. Incidents down. Not perfect, but real. "They're changing," she added. Ethan closed the folder. "Good," he said. Not satisfaction, not pride, just acknowledgement. Because change wasn't the goal, consistency was. He looked out at the skyline again, then spoke, quieter this time. "This only works if it lasts." Elise nodded. "It will." A pause. Then she turned to leave. Ethan remained where he was, still, grounded. Because somewhere, on a flight not unlike the one that started all of this, another passenger would sit down in a seat they paid for, and this time, no one would question why they were there. If this story stayed with you, if you believe moments like this should never be ignored, take a second to like and subscribe, and drop 3 words in the comments. Stand for justice.